Coming up today, President Park Geun-hye receives annual reports from the Foreign, Defense and Unification Ministries. The main focus is on keeping the country safe in the wake of growing threats from North Korea. The European Parliament votes in favor of a resolution that strongly condemns North Korea for its latest nuclear test. It calls it a dangerous provocation that violated UN Security Council resolutions. Plus, in a video message to the World Economic Forum in Davos, President Park voices hope that Korean culture can take greater hold around the world. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Friday, the 22nd of January. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, President Park Geun-hye has been receiving this year's policy briefings from the country's Foreign, Defense and Unification Ministries. Let's get the details from our Presidential Office correspondent Song Ji-son, who joins us on the line from Cheongwa-dae. So, Ji-son, North Korea and its latest provocation presumably dominated the briefings.
Yes, Mark, as you'd imagine, that was certainly the case. Let's begin by noting that before North Korea's nuclear test on January 6th, the theme for Friday's policy briefing had been building the groundwork for peaceful reunification. But that has since been modified to solid national security and steady preparation for reunification, putting greater focus on securing peace on the Korean peninsula following the North's latest provocation. Despite the tough road ahead for inter-Korean relations, President Park asked for consistency. She said the timing of resuming dialogue is not as important as ensuring there is the proper atmosphere and environment when it eventually happens. The president reiterated the importance of China's role in imposing strong and effective international sanctions on Pyongyang. She also proposed finding creative and diverse ways to encourage North Korea to denuclearize, raising the possibility of holding a long-stalled six-party talks minus North Korea. Back to you.
Well, thank you very much, Song Ji-son, for that report there from Cheongwa-dae. Now, for a more in-depth look into how the ministries in charge of foreign affairs, unification and defense are prepping to adjust to this shift in inter-Korean relations, Connie Kim reports.
South Korea's top security policy this year is to firmly respond to North Korea's fourth nuclear test. 3 government ministries in charge of diplomacy and security presented their plans for 2016 on Friday, focusing on countermeasures to Pyongyang's recent provocation. South Korea plans to establish a strong defense posture against any North Korean nuclear threats or provocations such as last summer's landmine attack in the demilitarized zone that seriously injured 2 South Korean soldiers. Seoul will continue to maintain a strong combined defense readiness with the U.S. for security on the Korean peninsula. South Korea's cooperation with its members and UN member nations will also be intensified to ensure North Korea is hit with the strongest possible UN Security Council resolution for the nuclear test. Seoul is seeking to bolster strategic cooperation with the U.S., China and Japan to persuade China and Russia, 2 veto-wielding members of the Security Council, to play a constructive role in imposing tough sanctions on Pyongyang. Preparing for reunification is another key project. South Korea will continue its efforts through President Park Geun-hye's trust-building process that shows the South will sternly respond to the North's threats, but cooperate when Pyongyang shows a change in attitude. Seoul plans to work on regularizing reunions for families separated by the Korean War and facilitate letter exchanges when inter-Korean ties improve. But with all civilian exchanges at a halt, South Korea plans to review the status quo of families living in the South and designate a date commemorating the families. With these plans, the South Korean government hopes to secure peace on the Korean peninsula and ensure the safety of its citizens. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, political heavyweight Park Jie-won of the main opposition Minjoo Party of Korea has announced his official departure from the party, promising more unity in the opposition bloc as a result. The former chief of staff to late President Kim Dae-jung said he will work for cooperation between the People's Party, led by Ahn Cheol-soo, and the Minjoo Party without having any particular party affiliation. Now, according to his aides, Park will likely run as an independent if the opposition bloc fails to unite ahead of the April 13th general election. Park is the de facto leader of a group of lawmakers who have their roots in Jeollado province. They have been denouncing outgoing Minjoo Party chief Moon Jae-in for deepening factional strife between loyalists of late President Roh Moo-hyun and those outside of that faction. The European Parliament has voted in favour of a resolution that strongly denounces North Korea for its recent nuclear test. The resolution calls on the international community to take further measures against Pyongyang for its nuclear programme and grave human rights abuses. Oh Soo-young has the details.
Europe is speaking with one voice over North Korea's recent nuclear test. Under the resolution, the European Parliament calls on North Korea to completely and irreversibly dismantle its nuclear arms and missile development program and restrain from any further provocations. It also denounced the systematic, widespread and grave violations of human rights in North Korea and called on the international community to refer the situation to the International Criminal Court. To produce a solution, members expressed their support for a meaningful discussion at the long-stalled denuclearization dialogue, known as the Six-Party Talks. But to effectively rein in North Korea, the resolution emphasized the role of China, its neighbor and closest ally. It urged Beijing to exert more political and financial pressure on Pyongyang to ensure peace and security in the region. The resolution also called on China to stick to its responsibilities as a party to the UN's Refugee Convention. It further urged China to protect the basic human rights of North Korean defectors instead of sending them back to the north as it routinely does. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, one of the perks of attending the World Economic Forum is the chance to enjoy some world-class food, entertainment and networking opportunities. And on Thursday night, local time, it was Korea's chance to shine. Our Kim Min-ji was there, and she filed this report from Davos.
Hundreds of people were able to taste a bit of Korean culture at the Korean Night event. Organized by the Federation of Korean Industries, the event was attended by prominent figures with a guest list including Special Presidential Envoy and Korea's former Finance Chief Choi Kyung-hwan, SK Group Chairman Choi Tae-won, as well as the CEO of Arirang TV Bang Seok-ho. The event, now in its 8th year, was held under the theme K-Culture Connect to the World. In a video message, President Park Geun-hye said Korea is stepping up its role in connecting the world.
The power of culture to bring healing is advancing the cause of human happiness. At a time when borders are eroding, when our world is increasingly becoming a shared community, I look forward to humanity being brought together and connecting through culture.
As the event aims to boost Korea's presence on the global stage, the organizers say the nation's private and public sectors will work together to further promote Korea's brand value. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News, Davos.
Now, UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon is another distinguished guest attending the World Economic Forum in Davos. In a speech to the forum on Thursday, the UN chief urged world leaders to join global efforts to address climate change by ratifying the historic agreement reached in Paris in December. He also called for sufficient financing for developing countries to encourage less dependence on fossil fuels. During another speech, Secretary Ban stressed the need to end poverty and create sustainable food systems through a successful implementation of the UN's ambitious 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The initiative aims to eliminate hunger within 15 years. Now, the theme of this year's World Economic Forum in Davos is the fourth industrial revolution. But tumbling oil prices and China's slowing growth are actually the topics dominating talks among global leaders. Han Da-an has the details.
World business leaders voiced concerns over current global economic woes, indicating a grim outlook for the future. Their main concerns? The continuing drop in oil prices and China's slowing growth.
Drop of oil prices, Chinese slowing down, tightening liquidities of the banks, all affecting, I believe, the economy. I hope the picture will look brighter as we go on in the year, but for the moment it doesn't look bright.
Hussein al-Nouais from the United Arab Emirates added that with the entry of Iran, global oil prices will be affected even more, sparking further volatility in global stock markets. Christopher Pissarides of the London School of Economics echoed the view, saying that although sporadic rebounds are expected, record low oil prices will remain for quite some time. Expressing concerns over China's economic slump, economists suggested the Chinese government implement more transparent economic policies and further accelerate economic reforms. Some, however, were optimistic, expressing confidence in the strength of the current state of the world's economy.
There are some concerns about the Chinese financial structure, banking structure and so on, but I think if you look in the world generally, the strength, the financial strength of the financial institutions is strong, much stronger than it was, say, 7-10 years ago.
For some European leaders, the fight against terrorism topped the agenda.
So we all discussed the best way to fight terrorism with military means and on the diplomatic level, but also on the internet. I will meet with delegates from Facebook shortly.
The UK's EU referendum to leave the European Union, or Brexit, also took center stage, with French Prime Minister Manuel Valls saying it would be a tragedy triggering disastrous consequences at a time when the EU needs to stick together the most. Handan, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, the first export of US crude oil in 4 decades arrived in Europe early this week after restrictions on the country's crude oil exports were lifted. An oil tanker from the US arrived in France on Wednesday, while another tanker carrying American crude is destined for the Netherlands. The oil was exported by the Vitol Group, the world's largest independent oil trader based in the Netherlands. The most likely destination for the US crude is a refinery in Switzerland. The Financial Times called the news a landmark moment for an industry battling a collapse in oil prices. Most of the Korean peninsula remains in the grips of an extreme cold snap for the 5th consecutive day now. The Korean Meteorological Administration forecasts that a cold, high-pressure system from northern China will cause temperatures to drop even further through Monday. Now, the mercury is forecast to dip to around minus 15 degrees Celsius in Seoul on Sunday morning. The weather agency has also issued a dry weather advisory for potential fires in the country's eastern regions. Now, over in the United States, millions of people are bracing for major snowstorms, with warnings issued up and down the East Coast. The U.S. National Weather Service issued a blizzard warning for Washington, D.C. on Friday, predicting more than 60 centimeters of snow. The storm is expected to hit New York over the weekend and affect at least 15 states in northeastern United States. A British inquiry into the assassination of a former Russian spy in 2006 has concluded that President Vladimir Putin probably approved the operation to kill him. Moscow has reacted angrily to the report, saying it falsely blackens Russia's reputation. Kwon Jang-ho has the details.
After a year-long investigation, retired High Court Judge Sir Robert Owen delivered his report to the British government, concluding that Alexander Litvinenko was murdered by 2 former KGB officers under orders from the Russian state.
I have made the finding that Mr. Litvinenko was poisoned by Mr. Lugovoy and Mr. Koftin. There is no evidence at all that either Mr. Lugovoy or Mr. Koftin had any personal reason to kill Mr. Litvinenko. Taking full account of all the evidence and analysis available to me, I find that the FSB operation to kill Mr. Litvinenko was probably approved by Mr. Patrushev and also by President Putin.
Litvinenko died from radiation poisoning in November 2006 after drinking from a teapot laced with polonium. He was a former FSB spy who accused the Russian spy agency of corruption and conspiracy. He fled to the UK in 2000, where he worked with the British spy agency MI6. He was highly critical of Putin and made personal and defamatory accusations against him. Sir Robert Owen's report said there was undoubtedly a personal dimension to the antagonism between Litvinenko and Putin. The Russian government reacted angrily to the report.
There was one goal. It was obvious from the very beginning to blacken Russia, to blacken its official representatives and leadership.
For now, the British government has frozen the assets of the two main suspects, and Litvinenko's wife has called for further sanctions on Russia. But the report is set to complicate an already difficult relationship between the two nations.
Well, look, what happened was absolutely appalling. And this report confirms what we've always believed. But do we, at some level, have to go on having some sort of relationship with them because we need a solution to the Syria crisis? Yes, we do, but we do it with clear eyes and a very cold heart.
Kwon Jang-woo, Arirang News.
Well, those are the stories we have for you on this Friday lunchtime here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out the website, arirang.com/news. Have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.